So Witcher 3 director comes out, says the game is great, says the game is like art, says it reminds him of the 90s where games still felt a bit uncertain, unknowable, says it's not copying AAA games, totally vindicating anyone who's been a fan of Crimson Desert so far, who have decided to ignore the detractors, the people who would derail this into a controls issue and et cetera, the story sucks, et cetera, et cetera. It's a copy. It's just borrowing all these mechanics, right? Like I did a whole video on last time. So I see this as a vindication because Konrad Tomaskowakowicz, yeah, say it 10 times fast if you can, Tomaskowakowicz. We'll just call him Konrad, the director of Witcher 3, has come out in favor of what Crimson Desert is doing, more or less, and says it is not the copy everyone's trying to sum it up to be. And I was thinking, why is everybody trying to do that? I mean, this is the complete opposite stance of the guy from Larian Studios, more or less. And how can that be? This is no, and Conrad, for short, is no casual observer, right? He's a director. He directed one of the greatest games ever made by many people's standards. So this is not a drop in the bucket in terms of opinions. But why is that? I'm just wondering why it is. Why would someone a veteran, because it's like gamers have become so jaded. I think that's what it is. Like the gaming community has become so jaded, so much so that when they see something like Crimson Desert, all they can do is try and map on other games to what it is. And this guy comes out who's a veteran of the industry, right? He's a notable veteran, and he's coming out like this is reminding him of something of a more sincere time in the video game industry, maybe. The era before pay to win, the era before microtransactions, the era before the AAA checklist of gaming, such and such. And I wonder if the issue is, if this guy's coming out and saying that, what does it say about the gaming community? Other than what I've already said, that we're just jaded at this point. We have no faith in anything original. We think everything is derivative of something else, and which causes everyone to map on other games to understand what this new game is presenting, such as Crimson Desert, right? It's Red Dead Redemption with Dynasty Warriors, with, like everyone does the, how do you understand this game? Let me tell you about other games. Instead of talking about what Crimson Desert is doing. And I think the issue here is the medium of video games has become so mature at this point, at such a rapid pace, really, if you think about it. If you think about it in terms of an artistic medium, it's matured very rapidly in terms of where we were in, let's say, the 90s, technology-wise, versus where we are now, what we can do with video games, motion capture, cinematography, this high fidelity, these open worlds, the AI mechanics of NPCs, like what we can program NPCs to do, just all kinds of advancements. And so the medium has really matured itself quite quickly. But one of the reasons it's matured so rapidly is because of this distinct language of gaming we've developed. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the mechanics are the language of video games, right? Stamina bars, lock on, HP, riding a horse, This is the vocabulary of gaming. And people have begun to think that they're fluent in the language of games, so much to a point that they don't need to even look at what a game is presenting them as much as they need to just compare it to another game that they already know. So what I'm trying to say, if I can fucking get to the point, if I can fucking get to the point here, I think fluency in gaming right now is part of the issue, is part of the problem. Or maybe it's not that we are fluent, but we think we're fluent. We think we understand the language of games, and therefore when a sentence is not making sense, we sum it up to bad game design or something like that. We sum it up with a cynical amalgamation of borrowed mechanics. It's just a copy of something else. We've become so adept at pattern recognition of what makes up a game that we forget that we could actually restructure the vocabulary. We can restructure the sentence to present a new idea. But the problem is, because we think we're so fluent, when you don't understand the sentence, you think it's gibberish. That's the problem. Instead of taking the time, the problem with pattern recognition is that it's going to ignore the depth in a way that creates a unique identity for the game, at least. I'm not saying it's the deepest game in the world, but it has its own identity for sure, which I think relates to the comments from Conrad saying this is not a copy of AAA games. So this game has its own thing, right? But people refuse to understand that to begin with because to them, they already knew. They were already fluent in the language of games. Of course they were. And because of that, Crimson Desert feels like more of the same, but not as good because it's not the first time they've seen it. We've seen too much. We recognize patterns immediately. And that fluency is useful, but it's also a trap. And we believe because we recognize these things, because we see the pattern, that we're masters of this language. You recognize a mechanic, and then you immediately file it away under, yep, just like this other game. You categorize it before it had time to mean anything. So we see stamina, we see the lock-on, we see mounted traversal, we see cinematic combat, and we build the case in our head. But it's kind of like if you're trying to understand a foreign language and you know some of the words, and so you think you know what it's about, but really you're missing all the nuance in between. You know, you picked up on a couple words, you get the gist. You get the gist, but you can't pick up on the nuance. And so you essentially could miss the entire meaning. And the problem with trying to criticize games through comparison to other games is that, well, then when does the interpretation arrive? It may never arrive. And so the game's identity is only based on what has influenced it. It just resembles the identity of another game. Therefore, it must be, in simplified terms, it's just like this. Or because it's doing in the opposite, because it's doing something new that we can't understand immediately, because we can't compare what it's doing to another game, then we see that as gibberish. So you see the problem with that, you know, because there's plenty of people hate this game for its mechanics and its design who can't get past a certain hour mark with it because for them, they already know what a good game should feel like in their head. They're masters of gaming language. God forbid a developer tries to do something that they are unaccustomed to. And again, I'm not saying that all the choices they've made in Crimson Desert have been genius or something, but the game is getting unfairly criticized, I think, in many regards. And people don't want to look in the mirror about that, quite frankly. People don't want to look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's me. It's like the guy from Witcher 3 has got your back now if you like Crimson Desert, and you're blackpilling? And you're blackpilling that all new modern games are slop? Just relax. You know, it's like, just fucking relax a little bit. Actually try to enjoy a game. I can't get in and the controls are too much. Just chill, dude. So the real question is, it's not what does it have, it's what does it do with what it is giving us? How does it restructure the vocabulary to give us a new sense, to give us a new meaning of the word, to give us a new meaning of the vocabulary? If a game is using familiar language, but it's speaking in a unfamiliar way, people often they're not going to pause long enough to hear the difference. You know? They hear the accent and they think, oh, I got it. So when people see this game as like, and see, oh, well, it's just like this, it's just like that, but it's not as good, or I see all these other games in this, it's like, yeah, of course you can see that, of course. They're not recreating these systems to a mechanical atom, you know, like they're not going to do that, obviously. The medium of the medium of video games is mature now. It is what it is. So when the Larian Studio guy says that this is, expect a lot of other AAA games to copy Crimson Desert because there's less risk in it, it's the exact opposite, in fact. There's so much risk in it because we've become so fluent in understanding that the risks they're taking, people are baffled by. People who don't like the game, they're quite baffled by it. They're quite baffled by some of the choices. They're baffled by L1 Square talking, you know? That's a risk. That's a huge risk. It turned off a lot of people. Just that little mechanic alone. The L1 to Square interaction with things is enough for people to lose their mind. So there's less risk in it? No, I think these guys have taken a lot of big risks because they've taken what people have usually understood and they've reworked it. They use the same vocabulary, but it's a new sentence structure. And people can't decipher it in the beginning. That's risk. That's people trying something new within defined mechanics that we already know. But it's not. To say that this is to say that this game took the safe route is kind of crazy. And that's why the praise from Tomasz Kowakowicz matters, because he's a high-level developer. He's more likely to sense the difference between superficial resemblance and an actual structural identity. He's going to see the authorship in the relationships between mechanics. And that's a point I wanted to make in the previous video. I forgot to make, because if you go back to Larian's comments where he says it's a cynical amalgamation of borrowed mechanics, what that is neglecting is authorship. It's neglecting how those mechanics were synthesized together. In other words, it's the style. So he says it's a cynical amalgamation of borrowed mechanics. I say, yeah, but style. How does the authorship of those mechanics synthesize together? And it's pretty clear to see even by, again, the Larian Studio guy. I'm sorry, I don't know his name. His own admission they're synthesized pretty well because he's having fun with the game. So that's that. I mean, I just wanted to kind of get into that idea because I think gamers have become very arrogant in a way where they literally think they know everything. They think they know everything. They think they know everything about how games should be. I mean, a lot of gamers do. And the slightest frustration they have with a game it means the game is total garbage. Now, that really isn't the case anymore with Crimson Desert. Most people have been enjoying it. But I have seen, review videos that just totally get nuts with how much they hate the game, calling it slop even. And that anyone who likes this kind of game has no taste. They're up for more slop and feed me the slop. And you know what I want to say about that kind of shit too is like, that is slop mentality. When everything you look at is slop, that's slop mentality. Like, and you can tell they're just overzealous about it. They're eager, in fact, to find the first chance they can to call something slop. They'll preface their argument with, I really wanted this to be a positive review, but it's just more slop. It just sounds like a game you couldn't wrangle. That's all. Sorry about that. But it is reminding me of something similar when Elden Ring was released. There was a reviewer that was getting a lot of pushback. He went a little viral. I can't remember his name now, but basically his main complaint was he didn't like the mechanics of Elden Ring, and he wanted difficulty levels implemented. He complained about having to run back and get your souls or whatever. I can't remember what they're called in Elden Ring anymore, but you go and retrieve your souls. He hated that so much he ended up using a mod where he doesn't have to do that anymore, which just like defeats the whole purpose, right? Which is what everyone was saying to him. And he would reply with, don't tell me how to have fun. Don't tell me how to have fun with the game. I'll play the game however I want. Because he was saying, I do like the game, but this part sucks, so I just cut it out of the game, more or less, right? And is that not the same energy as these slop fiends who are just ready to criticize everything for being slop, and the gaming industry hates you? Stop supporting these companies that hate you. And while I agree there are plenty of companies that hate you, I don't find that to be the case with Pearl Abyss. I think they've been showing a lot of diligence on their part. So with all the updates and things that they're taking into account and how much they're willing to listen to feedback, maybe even to a detrimental degree, I don't think they hate you. I literally saw that in another review, a negative review, like, stop supporting these games that hate you. And it's these companies that hate you, and it's a Crimson Desert review. It's like, all right. So to me, it's like this, everything is slop has really gotten to their head. It's kind of fried their brain. They've become the slop they're fighting, So is there a connection to what I'm saying here? I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling, so I'll end it now. That's all I wanted to say. That's all I want to say on this. Those are just my thoughts. Like, share, subscribe. That's all I can say. All the best. Bye.